think we're going to go ahead and start. It is Friday late in the afternoon, I'm sure that, and also Friday before the spring break week, so I'm sure that not everybody wants to stay here too long. But thank you so much for coming and showing such great interest in something that we here at the Endowment find very exciting. And my name is Ivana Cvetković-Bajrović. I'm Associate Director for Europe here at the Endowment, and on behalf of my colleagues, particularly colleagues at the Europe Program Department who organized this event, I would like to welcome you. Like I said, we're really excited because we're hoping that in a sea of fairly bad news coming from the region, there could be something that we can look to as a way to address some of the issues, certainly not the host of very complex issues that the region and particularly Bosnia is facing. So let me just give you a little bit of a background on this project or context that will help to frame this project. The National Endowment for Democracy has been working in the countries of former Yugoslavia since the late 80s, and in Bosnia specifically since 1994. And since then, we funded, of course, a number of projects, hundreds of projects, but among them, dozens of programs that are using documentary films and other forms of art to address some of the most complex and sensitive issues. And one of those issues, perhaps the thorniest of all issues, is the issue of the recent past. The conflict of the 1990s, the facts of which are often very manipulated by the political elites for their personal interests, to mobilize voters, to hide their corruption. And by doing so, they're stifling the region's democratic transition, and this is why the endowment is interested in this particular phenomenon, because we believe that without a successful post-conflict transition, this region does not really have a shot at a successful democratic consolidation. And so the question is then, what can one do about this complex issue? What can one do to start tackling these issues, and particularly in Bosnia, the Bosnian conundrum? And I can't say that I have a perfect answer for that. I think certainly for the issues of the recent past, because even the facts that are established by international domestic courts are very often disputed. And if you get yourself into a discussion anywhere in the former Yugoslavia on who started the war, depending on where you are, you're very likely to get yourself into a fight. So then the question is, how does one approach this issue? And one of the things that we are seeing organizations are discovering as potentially a useful tool is individual storytelling. Telling individual stories is one way, certainly not a way to answer the big questions, and certainly not the way to answer all questions. But one way to tell a story in a way that is a little bit more difficult to negate, a little bit more difficult to question. And it's also a way to tell a story in a way that inspires cooperation, that inspires understanding, potentially reconciliation in the end. And there's a number of projects that are taking this approach. Some are using film. Some are using personal artifacts that are displayed in the museum, such as the War Childhood Museum that the Endowment is also supporting in Sarajevo. And the project that we're going to present today and later discuss today is the prime example of this approach. It's an award-winning documentary series of 4 episodes, each of which is 30 minutes. Today we're going to show you only one of those episodes that was carefully selected by our Assistant Program Officer, Faith Bailey-Wuchiterna, who is going to also host the discussion to follow. And then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion after on whether something like this can really work, whether it can really help to address some of the issues that I just laid out. And to do that, we have a really impressive panel of experts and scholars and practitioners. I'll start with Velma Šarić. I'm going to introduce them very briefly. You've received some of their backgrounds in the invitation, but so that I can spare Faith of doing so later. Velma Šarić, who is half of the brain trust in the Post-Conflict Research Center, whose idea this was to begin with, together with the American-born Leslie, who is really doing some great work with young people, and this she'll tell us more about. And then Mirko Pincelli, who is the artist behind this, the person who makes it happen in a beautiful way that it does. And then Emir Suljagić, dear friend, my personally dear friend, but also a friend of the NED, and Srebrenica genocide survivor who has told his own story in a different way and can tell us about that experience. And last but not least, the relentless advocate for Balkan issues up in New York City, which I think is where this issue needs to be raised as well, professor from Columbia University, Tanya Domi, who actually organized a 2-day event where the speakers we're going to see today spoke and was kindly enough to let us borrow them for a day here in Washington, D.C. So thank you very much for coming here on a late Friday, and enjoy the film and the discussion to follow.
Šuti! Šuti, Brnjo! Brnjo! Znači. Mene Jagodom zovu, ali Agata mi je ime, pravo ime. Rođena sam 45. u maju mjesecu, 20. maja. Ovdje sam ja došla, kažem ti, 45. Zapravo ne, 66. došla na 67. Bilo nas je ovdje 60. Onda se sabjeralo sve u jednu kuću, na sjelo. U mene je djever samo imao televizor, nije niko imao više televizora. Svi se saberi kod njega, televizor gledaj, nije niko težak bio. Oni pomognu meni, ja njima i tako smo radili, a sad sam ostala sama, sad nema niko. Ajmo, Muso!
Idemo, sad da pomiriš, ajde malo. Ajde, idemo.
Meni je bilo dobro i s muslimanima. Što se tiče i muslimana, ja ne mogu. I kad se je zaratilo.
Mi ne gledamo kroz tu nacionalnu stranu. Mi ne gledamo ko smo, šta smo, mi se pomažemo uzajamno. Uvijek se poštujemo, evo vidite. Vezano za vjersku naciju, uopšte nije žena nacionalna, nismo mi nacionalni da tako da je uglavnom živimo jedan život, taj zajednički život koji dišemo malte ne jednom dušom.
Zaštitila opet koliko mogu. Primila poštena čovjeka, uvijek. Samo nepoštena nevišnjika. A poštena čovjeka uvijek bi primila u svoju kuću i koliko mogu pomogla bi ga. Eto, podijelila bi s njime na zadnji zalogaj kruha. Taka sam, mislim, tako sam odranjena. A ja sam rekla, u zločasti je daleko kuća od moje.
Ja sam Hamo Zlanović, rodom sam od Srebrenice, tačnije selo Luka, opština Srebrenica. Od svojih 11 godina sam počeo hodati po svijetu, što naš narod rekao trbuhom za kruhom.
Ponesi mi vode, Amele. Ponesi mi vode. Tako. Stavim ovu Amele u kombi, tamo nek ima, za ne daj Bože.
Živjeli smo da ne kažem ni siromašno i tako dalje, bilo nas je puno djece. Morao sam ja kao najstarije dijete od muškaraca da se borim, da idem da radim, da nešto steknem, tako da. Morao sam, znači, idem da radim i 90, odnosno 89. godine sam došao u olovo da radim. Neke konje da gonim i tako dalje, kuham hranu radnicima, radnicima koji su drva izgonili sa konjima iz šume i tako dalje. Dalje tu sam upoznao jednu ženu i jednog čovjeka po imenu Ilija i Jagoda, Čolić, selo Očevija.
I taj se mali pojavio nama i onda i ostao je kod nas, čuvao mi oca 15 dana u Skoševinu i onda je otišao od nas. Rat ga je dotjerao opet kod nas.
Dan po dan, prolazi dan, narod gine, puca se. I gledam ja na televiziji, JNA, vojska JNA je bombardovala moje selo. Krenuo sam 7. maja, 7. maj. Međutim, gore kad sam došao već do Ilijine i Jagodne garaže, oni su imali jednog cuku po imenu Soko se zove. Ja sam došao do garaže, dozgo, počeo je da lajne. Soko, znači mrak i tako da. Ja sam se javio 2 puta, cuko mi je prepoznao. Znači, nakon 3,5 godine.
I moj čovjek, ja vičem neko zviznu, rekao cuki ode, cuko. Kad moj čovjek izašao napolje, kad on viče da znaš ko nam iđe. Rekao ko? Kaže mali Ambija. I on je došao kod nas i tako je to bilo sve kod nas i večero i legli smo spavat i on kaže bit ću 2 dana, 3, kaže pa ću ići opet u Banoviće konjima. Kaže njemu moj Ilija, nećeš ići sine nikuda, ti si gotovo je, ti si došao, rat je, da ti glavu gubiš, ja ne bi kabulio tvom ocu.
Jedan dan sjeli smo da ručamo. Kiša je padala, što naš narod rekao kako sam Bog hoće. Dolazi 3 vojnika HVO s puškom. Znači, dobro, jedan je od pokojnog Ilije Sestrić. Meni Jagoda ustala i naredila da idem nastat gore. Idi gore, kaže, lezi i slušaj glasno. Ja nisam otišao. Bio sam pošao po imenu Anton, Sestrić Ilin, i rekao, vrati se mali sjeti, kad se bojiš, niko ništa ovo. Da bi ustali da krenu, imali su 2 automatske puške i 1 garabin. I posljednji kad izašao iz kuće, rekao, mali pa kuj si desna. Kaže, njemu Ilija, kud ide? Ide, kaže, mora ići s nama, nek da neku izjavu pa nek se vrati. Navod, da ja dam neku izjavu. Međutim, Ilija mene je gurnuo ovako laktom iza sebe i rekao, mali, sjedi tamo, a tom Anti, svom sestriću, je rekao, samo preko mene mrtvoga možeš uvesti. Kleknuo na koljena i stavio ovako glavu naprag, nije direktno dole, on je stavio, ali položio je prema pragu i kaže glava tam, trupina vam, Andija, može prijeći.
Ja sam riješila, ne mere dijete ići nikuda, rat je na sve strane, svojem ne mere proći prvo roditeljima i onda ne znaš kuće. Dijete budi s nama, šta budemo nosili mi, nosit ćeš i ti. To ja nisam razmišljala koja je vjera dijete, samo koju kako treba i gotovo. I ja sam primila ga srcem ko da sam ga i rodila.
Idemo malo provjeriti kombi, pošto ćemo sutra za Srebrenicu. treba žita uzeti kokošima. Tamo nema, nastalo je žita kokošima i cuki hljeba. Da povučim, da ostavim da ima da...
Zapiši da ne zaboravim.
Ha?
Zapiši da ne zaboravim.
Pa neću, ako ja zaboravim, nemoj ti je.
Otiću, hoće da vidiš jagodu.
Čuo sam da je nešto Zada je zvala, kao da je opljačkana. Neko je napao opet, to su ljudi kojim je ona najviše valjala onda. Pa ćemo kad dođemo otud, ako Bog da, otićemo vidjeti predmrak, da idemo svi na konak. Otići malo i vidjeti da imamo jedan dan slobodan. Ako bude šta da se uradi onda u Kokušilju. Otac, sin jesmo, ali u nekim stvarima i više tih stvari kao dva druga.
On je jako dobar prema meni, pomaže mi oko radova, na selu. Kad je otac u mene bio bolestan, morali smo da ga dižemo iz postelje, nije mogao da hoda. To smo radili ja i mama. Davali smo mu lijekove, išli smo sa njim na terapije. Prvi dan kad je prohodao, bio sam najsretnije dijete.
Ja kad dođem ovdje, kad se probudim ovdje izjutra, znači imam taj osjećaj da imam 90 godina. Znaš šta je ovo?
Ne znam.
Ovo smo mi prije kao djeca ovako samo pravili smo veći. Siluk, ovdje je trenutno siluk za ribu onaj.
No.
Ali prije smo mi traži konje po selu, pa čupaj rep od konja, dlake izvlačiš, uzmeš onaj vito što žene suču čarape kad hoće pletu. Ja, uvrnemo dobro i napravimo ovako ovu jednu, takozvana omča. Onda vidiš ovu, ovdje nabiješ
kukuruz.
Ovdje staviš kukuruz.
Ja.
I ptica kad dođe da kljuje ovaj kukuruz, ona mora stane i vidiš ufati se za ovo i onda ne mre da hodi. Tako da onaj...
Gdje postavite to?
Pa to kad snijeg padne, to se ne može stavljati ovako kad je ljeto, kad imaju ptice šta da jedu. Zahvaljujući Ili Jagodi prvenstveno, pa sam ja takva osoba kakva jesam, znači teško mi je palo kad sam izgubio Iliju, a kako ću podnijeti Jagodu kad izgubim, ne znam, kad sam nedavno bio kod Jagode, ne mogu, nešto me, ovdje me nešto stišće, ovdje me nešto guši. Ovdje počiva moj Ilija i Mara, mati mu, a ovo je Jagoda ostavila za sebe spomenik. S tim što treba još ukucati godinu. I jedan i drugi.
drugi puta kad sam došao, znam svaki put, kad sam god dolazio, znači, ili odozdo prilazio kući ili odozgo dolazio, uvijek sam se javljao nekim glasom i uvijek mi se Ilija javio glasom. Međutim, tada kad sam došao ponovo, došao sam ozgo, došao sam sa svojim autom, to već, znači, drugi put posle smrti njegove, javljam se jako. I bilo mi je teško, plakao sam. Nisam plakao ni pred Jegodom, ni ništa, nego otišao sam tamo i zakućio, ima jedan veliki orah, gdje sam nekad često s Ilijom sjedio, pričao neke stvari koje su meni korisne bile najviše i od kojih ja danas i danima imao koristi.
Jagodo!
Daj, koji kura, šta se ti sjebala? A jebi ga, ti ostarila. Bježi ti u kući, sine, otvorena je kuća.
Šta ima?
Dobro,
Kak si?
Šta ima?
Da se ti postarala? Šta je?
Ti se
Zato plaće, ha?
postarao taki mlad.
Joj, ja
Pa
ovakvim...
vi ćeš meni,
Pa
šta sam se
moram.
postarala? E pa eto,
Moram, Jagoda.
moram. Ja sam sama i,
Šta ima?
pa evo vidiš,
Šta radi?
sad štalu namjerila. Ovce da reko,
3 sata.
pa
A i
neke,
mi se
Ajmo,
zadržali,
očeli,
išli
ti
malo
da
dole
pođe.
na ugroblje.
A išli-
Ili nagrobi.
a išli dole.
Babi, ja.
piši. 14 godina kako mi je muž umro, kako je umro, ja ovdje sama živim, nikoga nemam, nikog ništa je. Mamu nisam upamtila, mama mi je umrla, ja sam mala bila. Otac mi je bio zločest, ja sam morala oca napuštati, otići u najam. Svoga muža pokojnoga upoznala sam kao cura. I mi smo se i uzeli, i ja sam ostala živjet s njime i on je prilagodio se mojoj sudbini i ja njegovoj. Tako smo ostali živjet, nije sam ništa što se tiče tražila da se mijenja. I kažem ti, tako smo, mislim, zajednički živjeli, nismo se svađali, nisam ja volila svađu, nego sam se prilagodila kako mi je Bog odredio, tako da i živim i gotovo. Nego sam borila se za život i dan danas se borim, sama sam ostala, ali borim se da imam i da živim kao što sam živjela, uvijek. Ja znam, ja sam sirota bila, ja znam kakav sam život provodila. I zato sam njemu bila ko mati da ne osjeti apsolutno da je u tuđoj kući. I kad se ti oženiti i sve. To je dijete za vrijeme rata došlo kod nas, ta ga je sudbina donijela i primili smo ga, pa ako treba da glavu izgubimo, izgubit ćemo je, svetro je na svom pragu i gotovo.
Aneli! Pa nek stoji, hodi gore.
A nikad, ni u kakvom slučaju, ni u jednom momentu nisam zamislio, znači da je ostavim ili u jagodi. Jer, pazite dobro, nakon par mjeseci provedeni s Ilijom i s jagodom, ja sam imao taj osjećaj da je tu moj otac i moja mati. Razumite? Imali ste roditelja, izgubili ga i 4-5 godina ga nemate i naviknete se na to da ga nemate i na jedan put nađete nekog novog roditelja. Pa ovim riječima se smijem usuditi slobodno i da kažem ovim riječima drugog i boljeg roditelja.
On je bio kod mene 4 godine i 4 mjeseca. I kažem ti, nikad nisam razmišljala da će otići od nas. Ali je otišao, mi smo ga smatrali kao svoje dijete. I otišao je od nas, plakali smo za njim kad je pošao, ali pomjerili smo se sa sudbinom, moralo je tako da bude. Ali mora rad djece dalje otići, jer djeca u školu iđu i mora radi toga. Dijete rodiš pa ode od tebe, a da neće tuđe.
Posle sam tražio da od jagode, lično sam od jagode tražio da napusti sve to, da ide sa mnom, da živi sa mnom. Nije htjela prihvatiti. Ja sam čovjek koji sam dobio, tako da kažem, bore po čelu od 20 godina. Što sebe nekad zovem prokletim, zato što ja od svojih, evo sad, 38 punih godina sam imao nekih 11 godina pilja života. I kad sam se smio kao dijete i kad sam znao šta je radost i veselje i tako dalje, od tada moj život je uvijek borba. Ja sam obolio sam od prvog kiču. Znači, imam tu dvostruku diskus herniju, kičmi, imam pršljen i pol, pršljen skoro jedan truhu sav. To je za mene, to su za mene noćne more. Ja kratko kažem, ja ne znam šta je taj peti spion, to nazivaju tako, ali ja imam te noćne more, evo u prošle godine sam imao taj moždani.
Babo, dokle si, evo ja sam stigao u Slap. Čuješ li me? Ma nešto stigne me ovdje i jednostavno da zaplaćem kad on priča nešto. Tužno, pogotovo o ratu i šta je propatio i sve. Pogotovo i kad je bio bolestan.
Nešto što sam ja najljepše u životu je doživio i sam proživio, a to je djeca kad sam se. Najviše me pojede ta nepravda, ta što ne možeš da priuštiš osnovno i minimalno djeci i tako dalje. I vjerujte mi da, ne znam, volio bi me čini ponovo štrik na glavu, nego dočekat ponovo tu bolest.
Znam, shvatio sam da mi je bilo teško prije. I šta ću, mora se pomiriti s tim i da nastavim svoj život dalje. Nema drugog izbora da nastavi dalje dok ne mogu. Htio da završim školu, da nađem posao, da bude meni lakše, a i mojim roditeljima da bude lakše.
Pa ono što ja primjećujem kod njega, vidim da se dosta trudi, da je mlad još, što ja znam, ali mogu da primijetim da dosta i on ima ti neki pozitivni razmišljanja i da je veoma zainteresovan da sazna te neke priče koje sam ja doživio, da ih memoriše, kad kažem da memoriše, da ih zapamti i tako dalje. Volio bi onda da nisam došao u ovakvu situaciju da odgajam i pričam djetetu svom šta sam ja sve preživio, šta sam morao preživiti.
Dok smo bili svi skupa, bilo je milina sjest za ručak. Kad mi napravi, šta god bi se napravi, hvala Bogu, nismo gladni ustajali. Imali smo pa koliko je, noliko je, uglavnom imalo se. Onda smo bili sretni kad smo svi skupa. Sve četvero kad bi sjedi da jedemo. I opet ostane na stolu pa se vrati za večer. A kad ti sjedeš sam, ne mreš ti njega mjesta.
Nažalost, Jagoda ostala sama ovdje. Meni je žao što ne mogu na neki način da joj malo bolje pomognem i da budem tu prisutan. Čuli ste, ima mjesto uvijek kod mene, ali oca do njezinog kraja života bi se potpisao bilo gdje i bilo kada. Da ja izdržajem i njegujem, hranim. Ja Jagodu ne mogu nikad zaboraviti što je Jagoda uradila za mene i zašto ja ne bi to uradio isto za nju. Čovjek ne zna kakva ga sudbina nosi život, ali bio ja živ, ne bio i djeca moja isto tu uradila i mjesto mene i da nisam ja tu i supruga i tako dalje.
Koga hoće, ne mere se zabraniti, ne gleda se ljubav, ni koja je vjera, ni koja je nacija, nego srce hoće i gotovo je, drugo nema ništa. I to je uvijek bilo, to nije bilo po nacijama da se narodi, ali u budala ima svašta i po nacijama da se podijeli.
Ono što je Bog dao na ovu zemlju, tog čovjeka i tu ženu, tog Iliju, tu Jagodu, tu malo će se više roditi, što je rekao naš narod.
I just want to say what a privilege it is to have all of you here at the NED and to show one of the episodes of Ordinary Heroes. And we're going to have a moderated discussion now, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first couple questions I have are for Velma and Mirko, who created the film. And I want to start with Velma. Tell us about how the idea of highlighting stories of moral courage came to be.
First of all, I would like to say hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We are also apologizing for these small technical mistakes, but I hope you could get the whole sense of what film is. So literally, I would say that the idea of creating Ordinary Heroes, or the whole concept, which is multimedia educational program, and it consists several components, came through maybe our wish to create a new role models for the youth of Balkan and Bosnia. As you know, unfortunately, role models at this moment are war criminals, and usually we have narratives promoting hatred and more division. So what we wanted to do with the whole concept of Ordinary Heroes was, first of all, to highlight the stories of moral courage and rescue behavior, because we do believe that these stories could bring a new inspirational a setup for young people to bring them together, and especially for young people from, for example, Republika Srpska, to have a sense that they are not carrying the burden of the past, but that they can actually look up to some new role models, not just war criminals, for example. Yeah, I mean, the whole story started together with the Yale University. Literally on 2008, they were coming to Bosnia and trying to find the stories of moral courage and rescue behavior, because they previously had stories of Holocaust in Rwanda and Cambodia, and we started to track Ordinary Heroes in Bosnia. And I would say that it has been an amazing journey, and up till now, we have I would say like 30 stories in our archive, because we are also building archive of Ordinary Hero stories. And yeah, all our journey have been supported by National Endowment for Democracy. So we developed the whole concept through your support. So thank you. I will stop here.
Thank you. I have a related question for Mirko about the process of finding the people that you wanted to include in the series. How did you identify people to include and ultimately decide which people to include?
Thank you again for being here tonight. It's a very good and interesting question, and the first step is, of course, is what Velma does, because I'm not from Bosnia myself, so I would not be able to find the character myself. All I can do is very much to try to understand what's the background of the people are, and try to embed with them and try to understand what they went through, because eventually, first of all, as an outsider that goes to a country and asks people to open up and tell stories that they are 20 years old and hold inside them for so long, I think you have a very big responsibility. And the way I worked only with Velma in Bosnia, and we made over 10 films together, is because of the approach and the sensibility that she has to ask to anyone to be involved in a film. So usually, we spend weeks to become friends with the people, because to ask to someone, can I be in your bedroom and film you when you wake up in the morning, not something that you can do in a couple of hours that you spend with someone. So it's very much like understanding who you have in front, and never really pushing. You go there, you show up, you spend a week, a day, a month, few months with them, and then you disappear and you go to the next film. So it's really important that you're humble when you approach characters, and you really try to, again, in a humble way, understand what their background and their experience that they had to hold in for so long means for them. And this series was meant to reach especially young people, which they're the future of any country. And I think it was very interesting. We met a few characters before we chose to have Hamdia and Jagoda as the main characters. We wanted someone that people could connect with, even young people, because again, media and films, I think, is one of the best medium to reach an audience and build interest in stories that they should be learned, they should be listened, they should be respected.
Mm-hmm. You kind of answered my next question, but just to elaborate more, why is film or other forms of art an important tool for dealing with subjects that are polarizing and painful?
I think any form of art, as you just said, is important. For me, film is my language. You know, it's not speaking my main language, but it's a visual approach to a reality I have in front. So film in particular, I think, again, can really build an energy between the viewer and a film, and has really the capacity to transmit a history in a simple way, in a way that can be digested by a teenager at school, which sometimes can be more effective than a school book, especially in a country where history is taught in 3 completely different ways. So I think film, photography, writing, you know, any form of art should be used to inform and to bring a history which in a country like Bosnia is pushed back and is kind of left behind, swept under the carpet, while instead it should be brought to teenagers especially.
Velma, I want to hear more about how you actually use the films in PCRC's programming. And I have a follow-up question to that. There was something really interesting that you mentioned yesterday at the Harriman Institute conference, which I had the pleasure to attend. You said that with young participants of your program that you don't actually use the word reconciliation. And I'm curious, what goes into that choice? How do you frame the Ordinary Heroes program with the young participants, and why is that language important?
I mean, as Mirko mentioned, and every country, you know, the future of every country are youth. And unfortunately, as you know, many of you, because I know that, you know Balkan, we are a country which is still dealing with the pure phenomenon of segregation, which is two schools under one roof. We have 56 of them. Unfortunately, as Mirko mentioned, we have 3 interpretations of the recent history. And the word reconciliation is extremely sensitive, because if you take a look at the whole pillars of transitional justice, none of these things have been accomplished in Bosnia. You know, we know that there is no reparations, there is no state laws regarding the genocide denial, there is so many different issues that we are facing with impunity for perpetrators, and I'm not going to go into that. But it's really extremely difficult to come and talk about reconciliation. Actually, we need to define who has to be reconciled, who should be reconciling, victim and perpetrators. If we know that in every single small community or city, the victims are meeting the perpetrators. So yes, we don't use the word reconciliation. We would rather use sustainable peace building. Like we like to kind of talk about the terms like building resilience and bringing the interethnic and interreligious dialogue between young people. Because we do believe that if we try to impose and push the term reconciliation, and unfortunately that is what is going on last 20 years after the war, you know, we are still struggling so much by defining the whole process of reconciliation, and we do see that we are unfortunately living in more divided countries than immediately after the war. It's extremely important for young people to come to these safe spaces, and that they do feel like that they can talk about, that they can actually, spend some time together, because we have young people from Banja Luka and Sarajevo, and that's 3-4 hours that they never are visiting, that they're never visiting the cities. And yeah, we are trying to be extremely sensitive and bring the content which is multimedia and multidisciplinary and educational on a very sensitive manner among youth, so that they don't feel pushed to reconcile when they didn't even fight between each other. So
I want to bring Tanya and Emir into the conversation as well. First, for Tanya, I understand that as a professor at Columbia teaching courses on human rights and democratic transition in the Balkans, that you find great importance in using individual stories such as court testimonies and individual stories shown on film and other multimediums as a really important tool for the classroom. So can you tell us a bit about that methodology for you and why that's important?
First of all, let me thank the NED, and let me thank my dear friend Ivana Bajrovic, because she has helped me a great deal in my field research, and I want people to know here just how important she's been for a lot of us. So anyway, thank you, Ivana. Thank you for this wonderful invitation. Well, what's interesting about that question is, I would say, I've been teaching at Columbia for 10 years. My teaching has dramatically changed over the last 5 to 6 years. You can read a court transcript, which can be devastating. Generally speaking, what I do is I have my students look at the press production of ICTY and use the charge sheet so that they can see the crimes. And then, use the court transcripts as a way to pull out what was actually said and judged. That's pretty dry stuff, though, very dry. And I think what we know now is that people learn visually much more now than ever before. It does not replace, reading theory. It doesn't replace study and research. However, to convey these stories the most effective way, beyond my ability to communicate them effectively, is using film and using personal stories as Velma has, articulated and has been portrayed in these beautiful films. That film made me cry. I hadn't seen it yet, so I did cry. I would say that one of the most powerful films I have seen on the former Yugoslavia and the war crimes was literally Depth 2. And when you get to the end, you know that everything that was on the audio was presented before the court. It was absolutely powerful that those were the words of people that were witnesses. So I do this on a regular basis. I bring it into my classroom. I bring speakers into my classroom. I bring people like this to Columbia so that my students get understanding about the scale, about the consequences, and how difficult that makes for a post-conflict scenario. And let's be clear about the Balkans. We did not leave Germany, ever. We left troops there. We were engaged with Germany. We had a German Marshall Program. We did NATO. We did the EU. We have prematurely left the Balkans in terms of our commitment. Not to say that Ned, I'm not talking about Ned, clearly commitment is here. But we're talking about a consistent engagement by the international community to reinforce over and over and over again rule of law, prosecution, accountability, transparency. This is not for the faint-hearted. This is long-term work. And this is conveyed to my students repeatedly.
I have a follow-up question related to that. Do you think that the international community is doing enough to sufficiently recognize the importance of post-conflict transition as a way to get to democratic transition? If you could follow up with that, and then also anyone else who would like to comment.
Oh, I think that is so true. I mean, I was in the OSCE mission from '96 to 2000 in Bosnia. I started working on Bosnia in 1991 when I was a congressional aide to the late Congressman Frank McCloskey. I have been going back and doing continuous research and doing analysis on the region, and post-conflict remains what it is today, in probably more present now, more palpable now, because we see the failures of the democratic transition. And I would point out that we see this in many different aspects beyond the courts, but clearly media play a role in advancing intolerance and nationalism. So yes, I think everyone has misjudged just how long this work is required.
Emir, would you maybe want to comment on that as well, or maybe also to talk about from the perspective of domestic politics? And do you think that with the current political reality, with players like Serbia or the Republika Srpska government not recognizing at a state level and policy level what happened in places like Srebrenica. Can this format that we're talking about of using individual stories, can that be a way to get to the goal of creating a common and commonly agreed upon fact-based history, or is there something else that domestic and international policymakers should be focusing on?
All right, you want me to write an essay about
Yeah,
that?
sorry for the long question.
Well, let me start off from something that Tanya brought up. I mean, the issue of disengagement from the Balkans. I mean, first of all, none of us should be surprised. The Balkans were never an issue that was related to, in any way, to core national and security interests of the United States of America, which is, when the U.S. got involved, it actually essentially ended the war. But the war ended as a result of a coercive diplomacy exercise rather than anything else. You cannot possibly compare, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to explain. You cannot possibly compare the dangers of the global reach of Nazi Germany and what happened, and the ramifications with what happened in the former Yugoslavia. And then, of course, there was this issue of ancient hatreds and all the other stereotypes at play that essentially allowed what was a genocide to be seen through the prism of or to be normalized through vocabulary, imagery, and of so-called ethnic cleansing. And Roy Gutman is here, and he can testify to that. That what was referred to as ethnic cleansing was actually a genocidal policy. But when you say ethnic cleansing, well, then in that case you don't have to act, and then it gets to drag on, to drag on for a couple of years until events such as Srebrenica. And whereas in fact there wasn't, the events of Prijedor of 1992 in terms of consequences are on the same level with Srebrenica. Now, when it comes to on the way here, I was thinking about something else. As we sit here today, there is a so-called conference in Banja Luka. Mr. Milorad Dodik has paid probably every single genocide-denying freak out there to come to Banja Luka at the expense of the Bosnian taxpayer. One among them is Jared Israel. Jared Israel goes around the world saying that U.S. government is actually behind the 9/11 attacks. Now, these are people who go out there, who spread these conspiracy theories, far left and far right fringe, which leads me to it will be covered by Dodik's media. It will receive coverage in the press. It will receive coverage on the TV. And by this point in time, it's probably around midnight in Bosnia now. By this point in time, things that have been said at that conference will have been seen by about 1 million people in Bosnia. Okay, and this is an official policy. No, now the problem here is, and there's another problem here. Radovan Karadzic, Bosnian war, as I said, as a result of many stereotypes. What happened in Bosnia in the 90s may have been seen as a tribal war, ethnic cleansing, and so on and so forth. But what happened in Christchurch, New Zealand recently, tells me at least that Karadzic and the leadership of the Bosnian Serbs and Slobodan Milosevic were actually the first to imagine the world in which we live today. Mm-hmm. They mainstreamed and they normalized the values, it's a long story, it's a long process, they mainstreamed the values that everyone now, pretty much everywhere in the world, has reason to fear. They reconceptualized and recast us as the Turks, but now, and I had this discussion at Columbia with Tanya the other day. The real question is now, who's the next Turk, people? All right, and on top of that, there has always been an international dimension to the Bosnian genocide. All right, Russian volunteers were coming into Bosnia to kill the Turks in 1992, in 1995. Today, again, as we speak, there has been a celebration of the Russian volunteers who died between 1992 and 95, there are two cemeteries, one outside Visegrad, which is, as a matter of fact, I'm sorry for the language I'll use, like the rape capital of the world, and one outside Sarajevo. All right. Now, that in and of itself, a bunch of volunteers. There was a group of Greek volunteers coming to Srebrenica. Now, these are people related to, and some of them are actually members of the Golden Dawn Party. So what happened in Bosnia has actually helped, and the sort of disengagement has helped mainstream these values. And more importantly, you now have a great power like Russia conducting, denying genocide as a matter of foreign policy. You have Russia vetoing UN Security Council resolutions on Srebrenica. Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Ministry, came out the other day saying that the Russian Federation supports Dodik's Commission on Srebrenica and Sarajevo, which are actually commissions that have been established in order to, have been formed in order to establish a counterfactual and competitive narrative to of events in Srebrenica and Sarajevo. So the idea that you can actually contain these values has been shown to be a complete failure.
Emir, what is your perception of attitudes of young people? I want to ask this to Velma as well, because you both work with young people. You as a professor, Velma with the Post-Conflict Research Center. Have you seen much change in continuity of attitudes towards young people dealing with the past over the years? And I want to be mindful of time as well, so after this we'll open the floor to questions and answers, but this will be my last question.
If I may, the real issue actually is, the real issue, it's always about the elites. Okay, if politics is what do they say, the authoritative allocation of values, then it's really always about the elites. And if you take a look at, if you look at mass killings and genocides as sort of top-down processes, then reckoning, accounting for it also has to be top-down processes. And there was a point in time in Bosnia, about 2004, 2005, among other things, thanks to a great man, Pedi Eshdown, when there was some sort of beginning of reckoning. And then in 2006, with a sort of very significant disengagement of the international community, all these efforts turned out to be in vain. But it really is all about elites. It's about people who actually create curricula. It's not about the young generation will be taught what it will be taught, but what they will be taught depends on the elites, on what the elites decide, on the narratives. Is the narrative of what had happened.
Velma, did you want to comment on this as well?
I'm just going to add that this also depends from the fact where they actually are living. So if they are based in Sarajevo, Mostar and Banja Luka, you do have less, let's say, or more open young people for collaboration and living together. But especially if they are coming from small cities and municipalities where sometimes you don't even have access to internet and you are struggling with, as you know, the biggest youth unemployment rate we have, the large level of apathy, I would say, among young people. That we have the young people just want to leave Bosnia. That is the biggest issue we recently are dealing. I would say that this definitely depends from place to place, but Amber is right. Everything is about the fact that what we can do right now is non-formal education. We still cannot go to the schools. If we want to go and teach peace education, for example, not even talk about war. Even I mentioned how, we would definitely have a fight if we started to talk about who started the war. But if we cannot go and try to promote, peace building curriculum and talk to young people how peace is important and how we need to cherish and work toward it, then we are really, really still dealing with many problems.
Let's open the floor now for questions and answers. We'll take maybe one or two at a time for now and then see how we're doing on time. If you could just be sure to introduce yourself before you have your question or comment.
microphone. Hello, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Una Haidari. I'm a journalist. I was wondering, Tanya said that there's the international community left the Balkans or reduced its presence in the Balkans too early. I would say that as a journalist and someone who tries to cover that part of the world more, or have it be present in foreign coverage, it's extremely difficult to get any story on Bosnia, on the Genocide Commission mentioned by Mr. Suljagic, and stuff like that, because there's a fatigue with the Balkans and its incessant and continuous problems. Just like there's a fatigue in the EU or in Brussels at a moment when they're dealing with Brexit, Ukraine, and other crises, whether in the EU or on its periphery, to deal with these continuous, these intractable problems relating to the Balkans. I wonder if the panelists want to talk about how, sort of, if the international attention is a factor in solving these issues, how do you maintain it at a moment when it isn't as strong as it should be, or it could be?
I'm going to go ahead and take
But
the question.
I'll say something about this because Una, you and I have talked about this. Well, you know, you got to be persistent as hell. That's what you have to be, and you just have to keep pushing. And I know that there are a number of journalists that really care about what's going on, and they're doing their best. But I think what's missing is the leveraging of the issues and what we have learned and why the Balkans are important. And I'll just say that what happened in Christchurch, and we know that the terrorist was listening to Serb turbo rock in the car that was idolizing Mr. Karadzic. And if that doesn't get people to wake up in Washington and other places like Brussels and Berlin, then they are really lost. And they need to be told that this is an example of what could happen and worsen. And we ignore the Balkans at our own peril. And I think that the media, is strapped. The business model doesn't work. Media has been bleeding out. A lot of them have closed down, but yet Australia reported that story. Canada reported that story. Turkey reported that story, and so did a number of outlets in the Balkans. So I think that I leverage the Balkan Studies program at Columbia to keep it present, that the issues that we're facing there are similar to other problem areas in the world, and we have a lot to learn from them. And by ignoring it, we ignore at our own peril. So I don't know what to say about editors in New York and here in DC, but they really need to pay attention because this is real. This is happening right now, and these issues where we have a huge vacuum in the Balkans, Turkey, China, Russia are filling the vacuums. They are filling the vacuums, and the United States has not been leaning forward. And that is truly regrettable. So we're talking about illiberal regimes that are filling these vacuums. They are not promoting democracy. This is a very much quid pro quo transaction. They get something out of it with the local government. So I don't want to continue, but somebody else weigh in here.
I mean, if I may, I'm not very much of a, I wouldn't call myself exactly an EU skeptic, but I'm really more of an Atlanticist. Brussels doesn't have a, EU doesn't have a phone number that you can actually call. So maybe it does now, but it has failed miserably already in the 90s. And I mean, the sort of a practical answer to your question is you can maintain attention by demonstrating how some of the things that happen there are related to core security and national interest of nation states in the West. Simple as that. Christchurch
Right.
kind of event. is directly related to, or is related to some national insecurity interest, unless states in the West actually want to have their citizens killed by fundamentalist maniacs, right? But that's about the only way you can do that. Again, as I said, I mean, treating the likes of Radovan Karadzic and Slobodan Milosevic as legitimate counterparts and wining and dining them under the chandeliers of Geneva and Brussels turns out to have had a lot of unintended consequences. And one of those unintended consequences is that they have actually served their policies have served as both breeding grounds and platform for dissemination of the values that are now undercutting and undermining, liberal democracies across the Western world.
Roy Gutman, journalist. So first of all, I have to tell you, I was very moved by the film and gripped by it. But to come back to Tanya's point about how she teaches sensitivity for these wars and war crimes, I wasn't clear what the crime was in the background or was there one? And it raised a question for me, at least, about the whole series. Maybe you could just describe, at least in outline, what you have in the four episodes. I just think the idea is so terrific to put ordinary people before the camera and tell their stories. The other thing, just to mention as a point, is that I think it's completely right to criticize the media for nearly everything. But in terms of today's news, I'm not quite sure how one could make major news out of what's happening in the Balkans, which is a very, very slow process of reconciliation, if that. When you consider that, let's say some of the worst atrocities on earth are occurring in places like Syria and in Yemen, and I don't think, and these are places where the media really should be, or it should be struggling to get the story out, and really has walked away from it. I think that's very regrettable. In our day, and for me, it's 25 years since I did my stories about the camps and so on. There was something so terrible going on then that was so egregious that it just shocked the sensibility to even think about it, and nobody was talking about it, nobody writing about it, and so we had an obligation to do our bit, and I think the media actually did, and it was not just myself, it was my colleagues who flocked to the area. Today, the media are flocking in the other direction. They're coming back to Washington, or they're just not reporting at all, and it's not just the business model. There seems to be a loss of interest in foreign news. So we have a very different world than then. But again, as I say, I salute what you're doing, because it seems to me it's a great remedy for the lack of reconciliation.
You can take about film.
I mean, to answer to I will answer to your second question first, because get connected to the question of someone had before for Tanya. I think another big problem in terms of film and documentary making. So let's take the media as news into an industry of filmmaking. This film was done with support and with the intention to reach a certain kind of public. But if you think about an independent production and want to make a film about Bosnia and want to tell a story, even in fiction, about a great story that could teach the world what happened 20 years ago, you will spend money. You spend a lot of money to make the film. The problem that you will face once the film is done is that there is not an audience in the Western world that are ready to watch the film. So more and more production are demotivated to do that kind of films because films need to remake money, and if you don't have an audience watching the film, you will never make the money back. So I think it's essential the work on an educational level in our countries to make young people, we almost have the same problem in-house, to make young people understand that it's key to learn a very recent history which is affecting their present. And look at platform as Netflix, how many films you would find about historical context like this today? You wouldn't find any. You would find stories about contractors that they go or snipers that they go in Afghanistan and Iraq, but you will not have stories telling a very important part of history. So I think there is also a responsibility from us to build awareness and educate young people to watch certain kind of film and documentaries. Otherwise, slowly and slowly, there is always going to be less film of this kind. In terms of
crime, I mean, we didn't because these documentaries, they have been created as a tool for education, literally for workshops. They ended up of being quite good, so they were on Al Jazeera Balkans. Like 4.8 million people had the chance to see them, and then few episodes ended up at UN Web TV, so we had 370 million people worldwide, and it was translated to 6 different languages, whatever. That's something completely different. I mean, in beginning, we can see that Hamdia is from Srebrenica. I mean, I do believe that people knows what happened over there, so we didn't want to go too much into the story about genocide. But I think that generally young people, they can get a sense because on a local level, they do understand. We have 3 more, and those are stories of, all ethnic and religious groups saving each other. So there is an incredible story about the Mostar Jewish community who actually during the war was helping like the whole city of Mostar, both sides. We have a great film which consists a lot of footage from Ron Haviv and Bijeljina, because we are talking about a courageous Serb man, George Krstić, who was helping his Muslim neighbors. So what we literally wanted to have is documentary for every ethnic and any religious group, including others, so that we can reach young people from all sides and all backgrounds. But I mean, we can share the passwords. We are still under a contract with Al Jazeera. It will be ended up soon, but we can share passwords with you if you are interested to see 3 other more.
But also I think is the highest level of crime in a way, because you have a common, very simple woman who decided to help a kid, who goes in front of her door, is knocking the door and asks for help, a glass of milk. And the woman was threatened, risked her life, and even today, we were talking about this last night, she's been robbed, she's been beaten. Today, 20 years after, for probably what she did in the past. So I don't know if there is any higher level of crime against a community and a simple action of a woman that just wanted to help a kid without looking at him, you're Muslim, you're Serb, or you're Croat, as we do in every other country, or we should do in any other country. So I think that's the crime that is the film talks about also, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%.
I would also add something that, we don't think very much about. These stories are inspiring because they're optimistic, that somebody actually answered the call, that somebody came to the aid of another person in distress, maybe under the worst circumstances one could imagine, and did a good and moral thing. And that's important because it's a teaching tool for young people to know that there may be somebody out there that they can help too. So I think it's very powerful.
And if I can just add, it was extremely difficult to get these stories and film them because unfortunately in these small communities there is so much stigma around rescuers' behavior and moral courage that these people are actually ashamed to talk about the goodness which they did during the war, or afraid that they will be stigmatized by their own community. So it wasn't easy at all to, get these stories and then also get permission that we can screen them on Al Jazeera and all these TVs because they did feel the pressure of community. So even 25 years after, it's still problematic.
To this same effect, actually, it may go a little outside the scope of your question, but as I said, I'm a proponent of a top-down approach. I'm not necessarily, but I personally believe that it's important that these stories are part of the narrative, and here's why. I had a very dubious privilege of actually covering the Milosevic and some of the other trials related to Srebrenica after I have personally survived Srebrenica. So, here I was in 1995, standing in Potocari with Ratko Mladic and all that, and then 2002 I end up, I'm in The Hague, and I'm actually watching these guys through the glass, line up and sitting in the dock, right? And you kind of tend to lose faith in humanity when you sit through one Srebrenica trial. And I was quite sure that what I was shocked at initially, what shocked me was that I couldn't find a single case of somebody helping somebody out. I could find cases of neighbors actually going out of their way to humiliate, to demean their former neighbors before they killed them, but I couldn't find a single case of somebody helping somebody else out. And then, after like spending 2 years there, I was reading this, court document. I mean, anybody who's ever worked as a court reporter knows what I'm talking about. I was sifting through hundreds of pages, and I ran into this story about a father and a son. Refik Hodžić later did a documentary based on that, about a father and a son. 4 people survived a mass execution at Branjevo farm, Dražen Erdemović, 10th, sabotage attachment and all. And 4 of them survived, and they approached an elderly man in the field, and they asked if he could help them. And he saw them for what they were. He saw them for, they were dirty, they were bloodied, they just, actually managed to survive a mass execution. And he went home. He brought them some food. He brought them some clothes, and he said, "Wait for me there. I'm going to go get my son." And his son was actually at the front line, and he picked up his son, and they came back home, and his son, took them part of the way and pointed them in a certain direction. And unfortunately, all 4 of them were captured, and all 4 of them were eventually killed. Now, the 2 men, the father and the son, were sent to, that was end of July 1995, and as you know, HV and Bosnian army were attacking the west, in the west of Bosnia. Places like Kupres were falling, So they picked the 2 of them, and they sent them to like the most vulnerable part of the Serbian front, hoping that they would get killed for what they did, for helping those 4 men. Somehow they managed to survive that. They're still living in this village outside Zvornik. They're completely ostracized. And nobody knows their story. I mean, nobody knew their story until Refik did this documentary. And they didn't even, they were so scared that they refused to be interviewed for this film. I mean, we know who they are, we know where they live. But here's the interesting thing. The guys, the military police of Zvornik Brigade, of the Bosnian Serb army, who actually arrested the 2 of them and who interviewed the 4 prisoners and made them, forced statements out of them, are working today in the land registry office in Zvornik. So it's important for these, again, as I say, I believe in a top-down approach. I believe that nothing brings reconciliation like, it doesn't matter. All right, I'm not going to say that. Like F-16s. But it's important for these stories to be on the record. 20 years, 50 years, 100 years down the road, somebody, will get to read them. That's why I actually, that's why I admire the efforts of people like Velma and my good friend Mirko Garibaldi. I'm sorry.
Whoa.
That's a lot of questions. Okay, so let's take several at a time, perhaps. So.
How?
Hi, Sasha Kissenchand. Many years ago, I was part of the project to write a book called Quest for a Viable Peace, and it focused on Kosovo, but as sort of a case study model for post-conflict reconstruction and reconciliation in general. And part of that book is a model that I think of as the tipping point. This was before Malcolm Gladwell's book, but that's how I thought of it, where we look at drivers of stabilization and drivers of conflict, and the idea is you wanted to get past that intersection to where momentum is more in favor of stabilization and peace than it is in rollback to conflict. So what I'm learning from you today is that there are still some very deep grievances that remain in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the region, where would you say along that, if you can envision what I try to describe, where does Bosnia and Herzegovina lie in terms of potential for a rollback towards violence, more violence and conflict, or being able to move ahead?
Since we're approaching 5:30, let's go ahead and take all of the questions now, and then we can.
Hi, I'm Bill Stubner, friend of Rayof and Ivana. I was just wondering, did you tap into all the work that's been done in the past on these good stories? Svetlana Broz, Malenko Skobic, did you meet him in Mostar?
Yeah.
Malenko collected hundreds of stories. Guy with the unfortunate name of Milosevic from central Bosnia. There had been a lot of this done. And I wrote an article, I guess in 1990, must have been about 1997, about that Admir Toskic, who was saved by a Serb policeman in Brčko. And there actually were 6 of them that would come to the Luka death camp and take boys out every day, and they would say, hey, let us kill some more. But they would take them back to their apartments and hide them until they could get them across the front line. So there, if you're looking for stories, there are thousands of them that have already been collected. And yes, I know when I wrote about Admir Toskic, that was in Svijet magazine, which no longer exists, but the editor received more telephone calls and letters about that one little story, he said, than he ever had, because people said, well, gee, we knew these things went on, and we never hear about it now, because of course the political leadership don't want people to hear those stories. So I think a lot of groundwork's been done, has never caught on. And I've been involved for 25 years. I finally gave up a year ago. But that's mostly because, frankly, if someone has half a brain today, a young person, they go get a job in Germany. And I don't think most of them are interested anymore on really trying to reform what they see as just a big mess.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I just want to respond to what you said with a question, which is I would really love to hear some of the stories of success that have come out of this work. I think one of the really brilliant things about it is that you make it so accessible to people, including all types of Bosnian youth, but also myself and all Americans who are going through some similar tensions, not to the same level. But I'm really curious to know some of the stories of success and really what we all might learn from the youth who are engaging with this great work.
We have a question over here and a couple over here.
I'm Peter Humphrey, an Intel analyst. I was a diplomat during this horrible time, and I watched my President Clinton ignore it month after month after month after month after month. And I was just so ashamed of that administration. What I'm curious about, and what bothered me at the time, was the complete laissez-faire on the part of the Orthodox clergy. And I actually hold them a bit accountable for this. At no point did any bishop stand up and say, I've heard what you did and you are excommunicated. Across the board, no clergy did that. And a mass excommunication of these perpetrators would have had an effect, but instead I see a completely passive clergy. And I'm wondering where that film is, where we've actually gone to the clerics and said, where were you? Why didn't you do anything? Could you have done anything? Or were you scared into submission yourself?
I think there was 2 more questions.
How do we answer?
Hi, my name is Grace Kong. I'm an international human rights lawyer. My question is, how would you evaluate the significance of ICTY and its judgments on ordinary people in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
And then we'll take one more question.
Hi, my name is Taif Jani, and I'm a survivor of the sectarian civil war of Iraq. So Velma, this is a question for you. I know you guys have a lot of questions to answer now. What are some of the challenges that you faced, in working with post-conflict, sustainable peace building? What are some of the challenges that you faced in working with youth of different religious backgrounds, and how did you work around these challenges? Thanks.
So several questions from topics ranging from success stories to challenges. So if you would like to respond to whichever question you prefer.
Yeah, I'm going to try to respond on this comment about many stories existing and the books. I do agree completely, and it did inspire us to continue on the way that we are, I would say, much more visual, because in our case, beside what you see, Ordinary Heroes documentary, this is just one component of a large multimedia project. So we have outdoor exhibition, we are hitting the public squares, like staying for a month minimum. We have been in 46 cities, through the whole Western Balkans. There is educational component, Heroes in Training, developed with University of Massachusetts and Sarajevo Science and Technology. So the whole training is actually based around social, I would say, social engagement and initiating pro-social behavior, but also learning psychology of rescuers and perpetrators and bystanders. So, for example, when we are talking about bystanders, we are pulling up example of city where Emir is born. Unfortunately, Bratunac, where all these men from Srebrenica have been taken, and nobody actually tried to save anybody. So there is the whole structure of the project we run. Up till now, we had more than 5,000 young people being engaged, and this actually inspired the whole competition and the next level of project, which is Srđan Aleksić Youth Competition. Srđan Aleksić was a Serb soldier who have been killed in Trebinje in 1992. We are challenging young people to find their own stories, but through multimedia and educational journalistic training we do. So basically, we are creating a new generations of youth reporters, and they don't report only about moral courage and rescues behavior and the positive people in their communities, but also about issues and problems. Up till now, we have 76 youth correspondents, mostly being trained through the support of National Endowment for Democracy. I will stop here, and I'm going to mention, thank you, Carrie, thank you. I mean, thank you for finding our program inspirational and replicable. And useful for other parts of the world. I do believe that United States of America, which personally I love a lot, and I'm Columbia Fellow thanks to our board president, and I mean, can learn and should rethink a lot about the future of this country. Yes, I'm also proud that we could influence, young people like you and young people which we are influencing in our own country. Yes, there are, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I brought a magazine which we recently also, published, and there is around 15 stories, successful cases, or like our show cases, which, you can read it. And I'm proud on our young people, because beside the fact that they have been, going through this training, they are also getting the skills and knowledge, and many of them have been employed after they started to work for us and writing stories. The challenges, I would say, yes, the lack of international monitoring and evaluation and support in the field of, let's not call reconciliation, but like post-conflict transformation, let's say, because unfortunately nobody understood necessity to support this process on the long term. That is why we are grateful to NAT, because they always had a focus on transitional justice. It's because, it is about how the donor policy shifted out. So we are struggling a lot, and we are mostly struggling regarding the funding, even if we are trying to develop sustainable ways of working with corporative sector and support ourselves. The biggest problem we have, I would say, is also criminal and corruption and nepotism. The lack of synergy among civil society. I think we should all, came up with an action plan. There is a lot of different challenges, but I mean, it's a process, so we need to keep going. We'll stop. And you take.
I just want to say a couple of things about peace building. That's something that people don't talk about very much. I mean, it's just not as Vilma has pointed out, you know, there's a curriculum and the prescribed educational approach. Let me just give you an illustration, though, of what I believe is peace building. The Prime Minister of New Zealand's actions are peace building actions, pulling people together, embracing everyone, identifying with the victim. That it was an incredible example of peace building in that country that really suffered a significant blow. Regarding your question on ICTY and its effect on the population, Bosnian Serbs and Serbs probably in Serbia are completely dismissive. To the extent that the court acted consistent with the crimes, you know, I believe, and I don't want to speak for Emir because he actually talked about this, but you know, that's important. Justice, classic justice is important. But what I have learned is that not everybody's going to get justice. Not everybody's case is going to be heard. And the court, I think, made a strategic mistake at the beginning, and they didn't really have engagement in the region from a public affairs standpoint, and that set them back, I think, considerably. That was a big omission, I think, strategically. But now, I mean, Velma was at the opening at the City Hall in Sarajevo, where there was a complete archive of all the cases, and also the Humanitarian Law Center in Belgrade has the archive as well. But justice is far away. Justice is just an idea. And that's why I think this work is so important, because for the survivors and their families, only the healing begins, maybe, after justice is rendered in a court. And the national capacity to deal with these cases continues in Bosnia, and it's really, quite frankly, challenged to deliver justice as we think of it. It's certainly not Perry Mason.
If I may just pick up from where Tanya left off, you know, you could actually sort of look at ICTY as an example of this Mersheimer's idea of failure of international institutions, or at least a case showing that international institutions are only as strong as there is a determined nation-state muscle behind it, and for as long as there was determination on part of a number of Western governments, it actually worked. It did fail to translate its findings, if you will, into political reality in not only in Bosnia but in Serbia. And I remember back when I was reporting from ICTY, the United States government has actually spent, it was B-92, and U.S. government spent, I believe, to the tune of a couple of $1 million a year to ensure that Milosevic's trial is aired in Serbia, and it actually really backfired because he used it as a pulpit, and the people who are ruling the country today are the people who are actually in the government with him before he was taken down, before October 5th, 2000. And that's only one of the reasons that, in answer to the question of the possibility of rollback to violence, it's only one of the reasons, and there are many others, that we are actually now more, the danger of rollback to violence is now more acute than it has ever been after the war. Vacuums are not sustainable. There is no vacuum in nature. There's no vacuum in society. Once there was no once there was no prevalent Western influence, others have moved in and fill the vacuum. And I'm primarily concerned with the kind of influence and with the kind of influence that Russia is exercising in that part of the world. And again, as we said here and speak, the Dodik's government is trying to push a bill through that would allow it to establish a reserve police force akin to something like a territorial defense, allowing, again, arming thousands of people and providing legal basis for them to take their weapons and uniforms home and keep them at home. But even more importantly, creating legal basis, and this is actually really interesting, creating legal basis for operatives of other intelligence agencies to come and work in Bosnia with or on behalf or for Dodik's police under identities that Dodik's police will provide them. And so again, I don't want to sound paranoid, but given the wider context, I think that there's the potential for rollback to violence has never been greater. That's my. And it's not only a matter of impression. These are facts. I mean, you could infer. If you will, both Dodik's or Serbia's or even Russian plans based on their actions, and their actions are such that there's only one path. There's only one way this dynamic can lead.
I don't want to cut off the discussion, but I also want to be mindful of the time. I know that it's late Friday evening, so thank you all for staying. And I think it says something about the work of Post-Conflict Research Center that this film was able to spark such an interesting discussion and such engaging questions. So if you could join me in giving a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you, everyone.